Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
You got it. We're back with another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing, cruising well over episode 100 now. Can't wait for you to hear this show. This is a great conversation with someone that I met for the first time at Bigger Pockets Conference, and then we immediately set this show to get recorded after that, and now it's a go, and you're about to hear it. But before we get there, these are your usual reminders, because we get so many listens, so many downloads, but we don't have that many reviews. So if you really like the podcast, wherever you listen, be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review. And if you're not following the podcast, make sure you follow it. Then you won't miss the episode that you know you were meant to hear just because you didn't click that follow button. All right, let's go. This week we have Nick Cooley. He's going to talk to you about the value of starting without a backup plan. That means burning the boats to get ready. This is a great story and it's a great journey. Let's go. This is episode 106 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Nick Cooley. Nick is a real estate investor and the co-founder of Jericho Capital. He's also a licensed agent, as am I. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. Nick, I'm excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
I'm glad to be here, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited. And we just met not that long ago at BPCon, but it's nice to get you right on here. The first thing I want to know, because I didn't find this out when we were talking in person, when was the first time you found yourself interested in real estate?
It's kind of it's a great lead question, by the way.
Oh, nice.
You do this often, I think.
Yeah. Well, I really like the background, because what I found, and I don't know your story yet, so it won't kill it. It's like, I've just found that it really helps listeners to find out that everybody didn't either grow up with real estate investing or even think real estate investing was anything. There's like all the spectrum. Let's hear yours.
Yeah, what a great lead. So this is going to tie in perfectly.
Yeah, great.
We're going to rewind back to my college days, and I played football and ran track at a university in central Nebraska. And one of the guys that I played with, he and I were moving to Denver at the same time post-college. And so he got involved as an agent right out of college. And we were meeting up for this New Year's party, just kind of like reconnecting. And he was like, dude, you won't believe it, but I work with these people that they buy houses and other people pay them off. and I was like,
yeah,
that would have been New Year's 2014 was the first time I got exposed to that idea.
Yeah, it's crazy because I think now, like, I've been like exposing my kids since they were little. I grew up with a dad who was an investor, so I kind of knew. But like, it's something like I wish this was in schools, because it's something that like you have that aha moment, low 20s. But like, what if you knew when you were 16? Maybe it would change the trajectory a little bit about what you want to do in terms of full-time employment and like scale eventually on investing.
Right.
So where, after you had the aha moment, how did you first start putting it into play?
Yeah. So, well, and also you deserve credit for, exposing more people to that idea, right? Like what
appreciate it.
It was 2016 by the time that my wife, Hannah, and I had finally, saved up enough money to do our first deal, because we somewhat infamously now started with like less than zero in our origin story.
Yeah. Well, but in those 2 years before you got money ready, what were you doing to get prepared? Because I think that's where some people get stuck in that mode, but you obviously were building up to, to get to an amount of money that you would be ready to go with.
Yeah, that's a great point too. So 2 different facets on that. Number one, we consumed information voraciously, right? Books, podcasts, interviews, whatever we could find just to become more intelligible about the subject at large.
Yeah.
It was free game. If it was out there, I was consuming it. And then the second part that I think is often overlooked in podcasts like this is it forced us to get our personal finances correct.
Yeah,
like,
that's fantastic.
It wasn't that like I was making money throughout that period, but I wasn't keeping any of it. So it was like, if you're going to be an investor, first you have to create that margin between what you have and what you still have left over to put to work. And so that 2-year window is forced us to examine our own personal habits to prepare to be investors later on down the road.
I mean, that's huge and some of the best advice that can be given out there, because I think a lot of people get in and then you ask them and they're like, oh, I have, 250,000 in debt. I have, 520 credit score. It's like, you can invest. And if you can, you're going to get an 18% hard money rate and lose all your money. So Let's rewind. So you guys really focused in on the financing, gotten it tightened up. And then at some point you just knew you were ready. Were you seeing properties before that, or were you just kind of prepping to get into it at that point?
Kind of like a little bit, like we were doing the Redfin, Zillow search type thing like everybody. But as we got closer, it helped having a friend that was at least initially involved in the industry. And so we started having conversations with slightly more sophisticated folks each so often. So by the time we were ready to, pull the trigger, luckily we had somewhat of a support network to help us out.
Yeah. And you said you're going through like an enormous amount of consumption. So like that, sometimes that can bog you down if you don't take it into the real world. But because you were relaying it to other people, did you go to meetups or anything? Or were you just kind of going, talking to the agent? But it seems like you're the type of guy, I feel like, who's making connections all the time. So as you go up there, did you have some connections, at least, like you said, besides the one realtor? So it make you feel like, hey, look, other people are doing it. Like, we can do this too.
What's funny is it's kind of a running joke. So Denver is home for Hannah and I. And every time we go to a Bigger Pockets conference in particular, it serves as like such a stark reminder that Denver really is such like an epicenter for real estate investing,
Yeah, I mean, in my head, I'm listing them off. Not just people on the show that I've had on from Denver, people that I've met at BP, all of BP, but then also all the stories that grew out of Denver as well. So I love having people from Denver on, because I think it's like, I know there's going to be a lot of like intertwining parts here.
Totally. And so we did start partaking in some of those local meetups. And full disclosure, if you're in Denver and you're listening to the show right now, you are at an advantage that most of the country would like do illegal things in order to gain the same competitive advantage that we have. So it's a blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was the first property that you guys bought, and what was it about that led you to take action? Because I know it's like you see it and then you're like, oh, actually, are we going to do this? Let's hear about how that went down.
Yeah. So the first property that we bought, we knew that we were going to be going into the nomad strategy, move into a place, take it as a primary, move out 12 months later.
Single families or multis? Which one?
Singles. Yep.
I like that strategy personally. Yeah, I like it.
I think had I learned more now, I would have started with a duplex or a quad. But one of the things that I do have that's an advantage is I'll take action without knowing the entirety of the landscape. So we were like, well, owning real estate is better than not owning real estate. We have 15 grand. So let's buy what we can and get started.
Yeah.
And we started looking in a part of town that was super desirable. And this was 2016 in Denver, which was a pretty competitive market. Not quite like what we saw in 2021, obviously, but a lot of parallels actually. And so we wrote offers on like 4 or 5 places and got outbid. And luckily we started expanding our search radius, and there was a townhome project that was still under construction. And so I took it upon myself. I'm like, my wife and I want a place to live. So I literally walked into this construction project and I started talking with the contractors in like broken Spanish. And we find a guy that's the soup on the site. And I was like, this is us.
What's the deal?
Yeah, we want to buy. So let us know who we need to talk to. And we were able to buy that first townhome actually off market. And this was 2016. A lot of people are like, oh, Denver's a bubble. It's overpriced. It's not even on the coast.
Yeah, whatever.
And you asked too, like what unlocked our ability to take action. We had the blessing of not having any backup plan. Like we came from no money. Like if this thing didn't work out, cool. we're right back to where we started. We might as well
Yeah.
try something and see if it works. And I think that really was an advantage looking back, that we didn't really have any other alternatives to improve our lives.
Yeah, you said something so important that I think investors should think about. It's like a lot of people focus on one area and they won't give up on it, but you're priced out of the area a lot of times or you can't win. And if you just expand a little, you go into these areas and you're like, wait, this is cool and it's cheaper and it's going to appreciate because it's going to be the next market that was just like that. So how did you have the foresight to just say like, let's go out a little? Sometimes it's losing though that pushes you out. Like, well, this sucks. Let's just keep build the radius a little further.
Yeah, that was really what it was. It's like, we had banged our head on the same wall 5 times in a row. And then we were like, well, we got let's compromise, whatever. Let's take action where we can and just get this party started. And luckily that, was enough to begin the addiction for us on trying to buy as much real estate as we could.
Yeah, and before we get to how it all mushroomed, I've always said I really like condos and townhouses as first investments because you have a little bit more protection. And like you said, you had 15, K down. That's what you had to figure out how to do. But you got something brand new with HOA, so you're not going to have to deal with windows and things like break. Was that also something that kind of helped you make that decision? A little bit easier, less risk.
That's great insight. So at the time, I was working a pretty busy business to business sales role. I viewed real estate first and foremost as something that eventually would make me an income so I wasn't reliant on 80-hour work weeks. I've always been in sales to some extent, but I wanted the idea. I wasn't hung up on cash flow in the immediate term, but more so building this snowball that when I decided to turn the faucet on 15 years, 20 years from now, that I would be able to replace my income. And so that actually was what maybe more than anything led us towards that new construction path, is I didn't care what the numbers were on a monthly basis. I knew what I was building for 2 decades from now. And hopefully I didn't have to be distracted with maintenance repairs in between now and 20 years from now.
Yeah, and you got the enjoyment of a brand new townhouse, which is super nice for a first property. So I think people always kind of miscalculate the enjoyment factor. It's okay to enjoy your real estate,
Totally,
and you can get appreciation. And not everyone has to be, like you said, a cash flow home run or even an appreciation home run. Because when you buy new construction, it's going to usually take longer to appreciate. But you have something that's brand new
right,
versus stuff built, 40 years ago.
right.
So how did you know that after the first one, when you guys are in the townhouse, how did you know this is going to be a thing? We need to do more of this.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I don't think we did after the first one. It required more faith maybe than just knowing, oh, we're hooked. Let's buy 100 of these,
Right.
But it's the old adage of, depending on which podcast you want to quote or book or whatever, 76% of millionaires made their money in real estate. I've yet to see the data set for that, but
yeah, it's 100 people that all knew each other, and then they kicked out 24, so there were 76 investors left. Yeah,
right. And so we're like, well, let's, if nothing else, let's just stick to the plan and keep doing more of this. By the time we had bought our second place, I think it was just the following year, I had cashed out my 401k and bought our second place in 2017. Still to this day, probably the worst deal that I've ever bought. But by the time we had burned the boats to get into that second one, I think that was really what set the hook for us as far as we're real estate investors now.
Yeah, yeah.
And that made it an identity thing. This is what we do. We're going to do more of this. And luckily, we had started to see some of that Denver appreciation curve. And that was, we're like, okay, if we have 10 of these, by the time we have them paid off in 20 years, we're going to be making 30 or 40 grand a month, and we'll have $10 million worth of real estate.
Yeah. So what was the mistake with the second deal? And then how did you know that you can learn from it, move past it, and then keep going to where you guys are now?
How much time do you have?
Yeah, all the time in the world. I mean, because the stories about not making the perfect decision really help other people know, you don't have to give up after one. You have to take as much learning.
Totally.
Let's see what you guys got.
Yeah. So we made the first mistake was we worked with an agent that wasn't an investor. It was a friend of a friend, and we like Becky, which isn't her name. We like Becky. She's nice. She'll help us out.
Yeah. she's a real estate agent, so she must understand investments,
Totally.
right? Now, of course, like less than 1% even have a clue about investing.
Exactly. But so that was mistake number one. And then the second mistake was probably buying based off of a lower price point and assuming that that was inherently less risky. And so now, if we would have bought the $450,000 condo downtown instead of the $320,000, the 450 is worth 850, and our 320 is worth 450.
Yeah, and needed work maybe. Yeah,
right. And like we could afford both at that time, but it was like, well, we're still new. Let's start here. This is less risky because it's cheaper. And we quickly learned that that's not necessarily always the case.
Yeah, well, you had also cashed out the 401k, so it's like, okay, we are burning the boats. So you do, I mean, this is really good advice because it's, sometimes burning the boats is great. Some people need to do it, whether it's dumping it into a property or dumping it into like a giant coaching program, because it's like no way out.
Mm-hmm.
But you maybe like didn't go all the way, if that's what you said. If you did, then you would have had it. So that definitely helps. Yeah. So what happened next on that journey? Because I think you said number one, so I think more is coming.
Yeah. So like literally the day after, well, since I said literally, let's be accurate.
Yeah.
I think it was 3 days after we closed on this condo in a high rise in downtown Denver, we got word that the HOA was going to do a special assessment. They were going to repipe the entire building.
I was thinking windows. I usually think windows, but like, here we go.
So, here we are. We're like, yeah, we're real estate investors. And 2 days later, they're like, here's your bill. That'll be $50,000 that you didn't anticipate, which to Hannah's credit, because up until this point, I'm like dragging her along this real estate journey, right? And didn't get a lot of brownie points immediately for this one.
Yeah, that wasn't a big win.
Right. So we figured out we can throw this special assessment onto like a note with the HOA. And we're going to pay this off $300 a month for the next 25 years. And Hannah started just going to town on Facebook Marketplace. So my wife is a nurse practitioner and she was an RN at the time. And she, knows friends that are nurses. And so we knew about this thing that has now blown up called travel nursing.
Yeah.
And so we probably furnished this condo for $500 all in. Like we drove around Denver and picked up like free bed frames. I think we spent 400 of that 500 on a mattress.
Yeah. I mean, but Facebook Marketplace has good stuff. People just need to get rid of it. It doesn't fit. They got a couch that's too big. They're just looking to get rid of it. Stuff's great.
Exactly. And so luckily by furnishing it and pivoting while we were already downstream into that travel nurse strategy, we were breaking even on a monthly basis. So we weren't, cash flowing. But when we bought that in 2017, it was worth $320. And now it's probably worth $400. And it hasn't been a cash cow, no, but even our very worst deal has made us $70,000-$80,000 in appreciation.
Yeah. I mean, I've always thought like sometimes you do a flip and it just doesn't go that well. And I remember I broke even on a flip like a few years ago that I really should have crushed. It was one of my favorites ever. And in the end, everyone was like, why aren't you more? And it took 22 months. I got a red card from the town. It was just like, whatever, everything that happened but I still love the property. And in the end, somebody was saying like, why aren't you more pissed off? I'm like, I mean, I broke even. I get back the down payment money. Now just go buy something else. Like
right.
They can't all work out. You guys obviously had the foresight. It really sounds like your relationship around real estate investing was important. Like you said, you were kind of dragging her along, but she was on the ride. It was just like, is this going to work? But then it probably, once you guys figured it out, now it's like, okay, we're going to do this together. And I found that partnerships that work well together on the investing, whether one's more interested in it or not, they both have to be on the same page. Because if your partner, spouse, roommate, anything is not on board, it's just like a constant fight about what you're doing with assets, and assets are what you're trying to build.
Totally. Yep. If anybody else is having that conversation now, one of the things that, so I was a psychobiology major in undergrad. So full disclosure, and Hannah's aware of this now, but I was definitely trying to like brainwash her during this process. And so
it's like, why do you have all these persuasion books on the desk here, Nick? You're reading Persuasion for the third time. Why?
How to win your wife in what? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so after we bought this second place, we were in a better spot with our personal finances, and we ended up taking a trip to Paris. And so it's like, this rental property that we're buying, that's what's paying for this trip. And so I was definitely trying to paint the picture of what our lives could be later on down the road by doing the right micro steps today. And fast forward, and it seems to have worked out okay.
Yeah, I'm glad that your psychological tests worked.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So after the second, and what was the point where you decided like, we're going to go all in on real estate investing, whether or not at some point you stopped the jobs and stuff, but when did you guys really know, like, this is the thing, we're going to keep doing this forever?
Yeah. I would say by the time we got to that second property, we were pretty committed to doing this for 30 years. Did I know that I was going to be in the business full time? No. And actually what kind of pushed me that way was had done sales role. And throughout our exposure in the real estate as a whole, I learned exactly what you alluded to, that most agents don't know their ass from their elbows when it comes to investment and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'd done like 5 or 6 deals, and I'm educating these guys on how to underwrite and how to manage it. And I was like,
where's my commission?
Yeah, this doesn't feel right, And so we had built up our portfolio to a point where it was maybe teeter-tottering on, could it be our full-time thing? Maybe, maybe not. And I just was like, well, I know more than most of these agents. That was maybe delusional at the time, but it's what I thought. And, even if I just make the same amount of money that I do now at a W-2, it'll act as if I'm keeping 25% more just because there's so many tax advantages. And so it was 2021 when I got licensed that it pretty quickly realized that this was going to be our thing full time.
Yeah. And would you agree? I always say this. I think all investors should get their real estate license just for access alone, and plus comps. Like it's not that expensive. Like it's like what, $1,000 a year total if you're just in one MLS. Like it's well worth it just to be able to go see every dump that comes on the market. But it'd be great. There's no REOs like right now, but when REOs were out, I got licensed like 10 years ago after 25 years as an investor. And my sister said the first thing, she's like, why didn't you do this before? We've been paying commissions for a year. I'm like, yeah. And then I realized, like you said, I knew everything. So it was much easier for me to be a real estate agent. Of course, it was easy to work with investors, but I knew more about houses because I had looked at so many houses.
What's funny is my default kind of response on that historically has always been not to get a license, actually.
Yeah.
I'm open to changing my mind, but traditionally I've always said that I am in the camp of not getting your license if it's only for yourself. And the primary the primary driver for that is you lose what all real estate investors love, which is leverage. Like if you're going to do one deal a year for yourself and your motivation is to save that 2.5%, 3%, don't bother. The people like you and I that are doing 5, 6, 7, 10 deals a month that know the market so well, we're going to beat you on those deals to find them and write a better offer anyway. Happily find the person that you can pay the 3% commission to or whatever it is, and use their knowledge and their acumen to buy a deal at a 10% discount instead of saving the 3 points.
Yeah, I mean, I actually agree with you. I think we're like saying the same thing in two parts because the way that I look at it is, to me, it's a no-brainer to be able, if you are an investor, then you can bring your investor friends who don't want to get licensed and get properties with them, and you're all looking together and it's fun.
Yeah.
It's like doing a live meetup all the time. And then you work with enough investors. It's like, well, I saw this property. They don't like it. Let me see who else might, because it's a decent deal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I agree. Just to do one deal, I've seen people, they're like, oh, well, I'm doing a flip and I want to list it. And it's like, well, that's a disaster because you don't even know what you're doing as an agent. So you don't want to list your baby as the agent. Right. Then everybody knows you're the flipper. I do that now, but I know what I'm doing. And people know me, so they know it's not like, a scam. But yeah, I've had that where it's a baby flipper and they're the listing agent and you're like, where are the permits? They're like, what permits? I'm like, oh, this one's going to be a problem.
Exactly. You touched on something else that's really good though too, and that like, if you're somebody that's listening to real estate investing podcasts and you already feel like that tug to go into being licensed, if you can serve other investors in your market, I think that is like such a sweet spot for people that are already on the fence about being involved in real estate full time. And I coach, other newer agents now, and it is so good just to diversify your income stream as an agent. There's people that I know in the Denver market that have sold a ton of residential real estate that are losing their minds over the NAR lawsuit.
Yeah.
They have no idea whether or not they're going to get paid next year, and they'll do 40, 50 million in transactions. Whereas us on the investor side, we're bringing value in a way that's different than just unlocking the door and asking the buyer where they want to put the Christmas tree.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as you're providing that opportunity, and I'm not saying that you have to do one or the other, but if you can do both, it gives you so much more of a runway as an agent. And the runway, the amount of time that you can spend in this business, will dictate whether or not you're successful.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, it's just a principle that your regular home buyer buys one house every 8 to 10 years, and a great investor can buy 8 to 10 houses in 1 year.
Yep.
Like, let's do the math here. 8 years, 64 homes, 8 years, 1 home.
Right.
So, and then also from, agents get in, they figure out how to get leads, they get Zillow leads, and they can't keep up because they don't realize like everybody wants what they want when they want it. And so investors, you can have 5 clients and do a wealth of deals and beat like everyone in your market by having 4 or 5 clients if you just treat them well and focus on them. So yeah, I love those principles, and I think it's smart, but I think we've just kind of gone both sides so people can understand, like, if you're going to one-off it, it's not really worth it.
Right.
But I think it's fun. I mean, like I said, I think it's like a traveling meetup. If you can do that, if REOs come back, those are the best. Nobody cares. They're always vacant. They're always winterized. So, make sure you go to the bathroom before you get in there. But we've all learned that lesson. Hey, it's Jonathan. This is just a brief interlude to talk to you about Deal Machine. Listen, I've used Deal Machine, and I was crushing it with my Concerned Citizen postcard on Deal Machine. You can look that video up on my YouTube and find out how I did it. It works. Deal Machine works. I've had David Lecko, the CEO, on the podcast. So if you want a free trial of Deal Machine, the elite Driving for Dollars app, and I'm telling you, it works if you use it correctly, you can go to my link at bit.ly/Zen Deal Machine. Now, bit.ly is bit.ly/Zen Deal Machine. It's free and you'll be up and running in 2 minutes, and then you can figure out if you want to keep it. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, so let's go forward though. When did you start going like kind of bigger? And then, once you're in full time, tell me how like you changed your business model in terms of what you're acquiring and then what you're doing with Jericho.
Yeah. So once we started getting into it full time, I was luckily in my sales roles in my W-2 life, which is more unsolicited advice for all of your listeners. I think one of the things that you should prioritize is being excellent at the job that you're currently in. Because one of the things that really changed our trajectory within the real estate business was I could lean on close friends that were also high performers from a past life. And we started doing burrs, we started doing flips, and we started raising private capital from people that already knew and trusted me. And so we went from, 5 doors to 20 within 18 months in an expensive market like Denver. And that was really pivotal in that people already knew what I stood for and what they could expect from a standard that I would tolerate from our business.
Yeah.
So we build up this, decently sized single family portfolio in Denver. And this is 2021, late 2021, when we're looking at the numbers, running a return on equity analysis. And we built our real estate business to have a badass life, not to build a cool real estate business, right?
Yeah.
And my wife and I would constantly be having conversations about, we got billed what from this property manager to change this light bulb. And 80% of our conversations were on that, not around her and I being life partners.
Yeah.
And so we look at each other over a bottle of wine and we're like, this isn't as passive as we were sold. Damn you, Brendan Turner. This is your fault, you know?
Yeah. Why did we think all real estate was passive? As if landlording could ever be passive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So from there, we knew, hey, this isn't building what we desired from life. And so between the balance of her and I's relationship and the return on equity, we made the decision in late 2021 to sell all of our single family portfolio. Everything must go. Hindsight, pretty good time to be a seller, right? So we had that going for us.
I did it. Yeah,
Nice.
I was gunning them during the pandemic. We had old ones. It's just like, let them fly. Now's the time.
Nice. So we sold that. We sold all of them. We have one left, but we sold all but one to fund our foray into out-of-state commercial. We figured that was going to help with cash flow, and that was going to increase the level of passivity so that we could, I jokingly say, like, as we get closer and closer to hopefully starting a family, equity is great, but it doesn't pay for diapers. And so
and you need a lot of them.
And so that was we didn't give up on real estate, but we pivoted again to change the model to create the lifestyle that we wanted. And that was what was, maybe what we deserve credit on for that period of life.
Yeah, but I mean, your journey is indicative of why real estate is so great as an asset. You can pivot when you're the owner of assets and trade them.
Correct.
I mean, this is what it is. And there's other people who want them because there is inventory everywhere. But like right now, we're in a quote inventory shortage just because we're talking about on market inventory. But I think that's hopeful for people who they take a multifamily course and they get 3 multifamilies and then they realize, like a lot of us, like landlording sucks. Mm-hmm. I really like the people, but I don't want to call at 12:30 about, a leak in the faucet. It's just not for me.
Right.
So you pivot, but you use your assets, like you said, to fund a new venture and still stay focused on real estate as a whole. So what did you pivot into? Did you guys create an idea together to create Jericho? And then what happened with that?
Yeah. So at that season, we knew we were going to exit single family, go all into out-of-state commercial. At that time, I meet my now business partner with Jericho, Brian, and I understand relationships, raising capital, underwriting. That's really kind of my zone of genius, if you want to use that term. But I do not understand construction. That is, if you're relying on me to do that, we do not have a competitive advantage in this market. But luckily, Brian does. He comes from bidding, managing, overseeing billion-dollar developments, and he understands that part in a way that I probably never will, right?
But also that you don't want to. It's not your skill set. So for you to have to learn that now would be a waste of your zone of genius, like you said, because you already have it. These are great points, because as you're trying to find business partners, you need to have the trust part, but you need to have skills that complement each other. Because great, what if nobody has then you have to bring in a third person, and then there goes the profit. So no, these are great points. So yeah, keep going on the journey, but I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, well said. It drives me nuts when people become partners with other folks solely because they're both afraid, and we just want to be afraid together and do the same thing.
Yeah. Or they have the exact same personality, and it's like, well, this isn't going to work out. Right. You guys are going to agree and disagree on everything.
Right. And so Brian moves into Denver from Michigan. He and I luckily were able to do 2, 3, 4 deals in the Denver market as kind of our test run. He could see how I operated as a broker and as an underwriter, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I got to see his zone of genius and how he was managing and operating these deals. And so, we were having a beer one day and talking about, what, if you just do what I call it a superpower, that thing that you do better than 99% of people with half of the effort, Brian, that's your thing, dude. Like, this is what you're called to do. If I could focus more on mine and you can do yours, there's a better than good chance that 1 + 1 might equal 3 here. So let's take that to market and see if it has legs. And we launched Jericho just over a year ago. We have closed and gone full cycle on 70 doors out of state.
Wow, that's quick. Yeah. For how many different deals was that?
That was 3. So we started with an 8 unit just to kind of test our theory.
That's a great start. Yeah.
And then every single deal since then has been bigger. And we now have, another 340 that we're expected to close in the next 6 to 9 months.
Yeah. I saw you were just out looking at one because I was watching you and Alyssa were out there. How was that one? Just curious while we're on here.
Yeah, awesome. We're really excited about that deal. There's obviously with everything of that scale, there's a couple, skeletons that we're going to have to figure out how to navigate, but
Yeah.
that's what makes it fun.
Yeah. When you go on site for these large out of state things, what type of research are you doing in advance on the town? Because, if you're focused on out of state, you're going to get in there and like you're going to get weird stuff across like, hey, here comes Topeka, Windsor, Illinois or something. What do you do before you head out to the property to make sure that like, okay, this is going to be worth the trip?
Shout out to everybody in Windsor, Illinois, by the way. Windsor's in the house.
Is that a place? I made it up, I think.
I took you at face value there.
I always use Topeka, and I don't know. I feel like they're going to get mad at me. I mean, I've never been there, but it's a great place. I know that, but it's just like I like the way that it sounds.
That's so funny. So that is such a critical point, dude. You're asking all the right questions.
I appreciate it.
We refuse. Like, I don't care what the deal is. I will not buy a deal in a market that I don't have a competitive advantage.
Yeah, exactly.
Up until this point, we've almost entirely, so the only deals that we'll do right now is Western Michigan, which is where Brian is originally from. And all of our subcontractors, all of our contractors we're literally standing by Brian in his wedding.
Oh, that's perfect.
If we can't control, like, especially in this like fund multifamily space,
yeah,
there is no shortage of people that can money whip me. Like San Francisco, New York, they can clearly outmoney us for sure.
Yeah.
However, if we get a quote from our drywall guy, Billy, I know for sure if he's going to be there Thursday at 8 a.m., like he's going to be there Thursday at 7:30,
Yeah, and you're not getting an overcost later. Like that's the cost.
Right.
We all know what it's going to cost. The competitive advantage thing I just wanted to touch on because you may not have heard. So my philosophy on any type of outer state investing for anybody, whether it's small scale or large scale, has always been this. Write a list. List number one is every place you've ever lived. That gives you a geographical competitive advantage. And then list number two is all the friends and family, the ones that you like and trust. Where do they live now? And then you take all of those towns and you put them on a sheet. And then when you're kind of like, you see something on Bigger Pockets or you're listening to On the Market and once you see a crossover or a deal comes and you have a crossover in there, you have a competitive advantage. You have boots on the ground, you have people in the area, or you have knowledge of the area yourself. So I just wanted to touch on that because I think you're pointing out that even on the larger scale, it's important when I think a lot of people think, well, it's just large scale, so we're just going to run the numbers.
Right.
That's not going to get the job done.
It's foolish. If you can't look at the address and know like, oh, if I'm 2 blocks this way, that's good. If I'm 2 blocks that way, that's bad. Look, this is a competitive business. And yes, it's great in that you can start from nothing like we did and build a really solid business, but it is a competitive one. And so if you're playing in a space where, you may or may not have that same competitive advantage, we alluded to it earlier where like the success of your agent business is, in my opinion, almost entirely predicated upon how long you can last in the business. And that's doubly or triply so on the investor side. If I'm making the decisions where there's an 83% chance of success, hey, that sounds pretty good, right? Until I figure out that it's Russian roulette and that other 17% literally ends the game.
Lose all your money.
Right. And so like the intention that we have as investors is first and foremost, here's what I'm starting out with principle wise. How many times in a row can I compound that without going back to zero? That's the entire game.
Yeah, you said it before. It's the snowball. I love the metaphor of a snowball because I also think of it as like momentum in a work context. Like you keep pushing it, you keep pushing it. But the second that you're like, it's kind of heavy, the ball's going to roll back down. And that's like smart investing. You don't want to dunk one in the middle because you're rolling the snowball really well. So you can't really mess up. But you also get better each project you do. So, like you said, you guys are moving forward. You started with 8, more units, and now you have an opportunity to have more units. And I've seen that across the scale of people who get into larger scale multi. You just understand what to do. And then once you do, going from 10 to 100, it sounds like a lot, but it's not really that much different. Yeah. If you understand the management of 10 to 20, you can do 100 if you're good at it.
And like, I know this sounds cliche, but it is easier to do the larger deals if you're well equipped to know the fundamentals. Like if this is your first podcast you're listening to, don't take this and say, well, Nick said 180 units.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, done. So
yeah, that guy Cooley, he told me I could get 110 units. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, this is year 7 for us, and we've done over 100 deals now. Like, we have a pretty good understanding of how the business operates. And once you have that foundation, it's like skiing, right? Like, once I know how to turn each way, you can turn me loose on like a double black, and now the whole mountain is open to me because I know the fundamentals.
Yeah.
Real estate's the same way.
Yeah, because of where you're geographically looking and what you're willing to accept, are you then vertically integrating property management, or do you have a company on site that will do it in the areas that you're focusing on?
Dude, I hope people understand how much like these are the right questions, y'all. Like, Jonathan knows what he's talking
appreciate
about.
It.
It's
I really want to make sure, like, when especially like, because you guys, you're spending an hour with me, I want to make sure we get the most out of your knowledge. And I've always thought that my job is to bring the things to light that not only I want to hear, but also that I think people need to know. So tell us, because this is important, and we'll talk about why.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on that. There's a part of me, and just so I'm not playing Switzerland entirely here, I'm probably not going to build that business from dumb luck, like no credit of my own. I've been able to learn about this business from people that are rich with a B in the space. And without fail, 98% of those folks have no interest in getting into the property management space. Even at the scale of the business that we're at, by bringing that in-house, it could be a savings of $200,000, $300,000 a year.
Yeah.
But if we were to do that, how many $1 million swing deals are we going to miss because we're heads down in saving $200,000? So my default perspective right now is to find the world's best third party in the 2 markets that we play in, pay them whatever they want, and then keep doing what is our zone of genius, which is finding and operating on these value add multifamily deals.
Yeah, and one thing that I think is important on that also coincides with something else we said. I think that getting good property managers is much easier at the more units you have, because they're more professional. You're not getting, Bob and Ronnie, they're doing a 6 unit and they could care less about you, and they'll tell you later that the AC broke. But, if you have a company that's doing 100 units and you can talk to people in the area like that, and that's a really smart decision by you, because I think I've done it before. I've said like, well, I like control freak, well, let me just do this. I can do this. And then I'm like, I hate this. Why did I do that?
Yeah.
Because even like you said before, a lot of people, they ditch their 9 to 5 and then they get into real estate investing thinking it's cool. We're going to be like in Bali all the time. And then they have like 2 full-time jobs in one,
right?
Because they're doing the management acquisition. They gotta go clean the gutters, and they don't realize how much it takes. So that's a really smart decision. I think some really good advice out there. So you're not going to go vertical integration. Where do you guys plan to go? So you have a subset in the hundreds of units that you're looking at. How many deals are those all together?
So, and that's probably on the conservative side. We're typically looking now in deals that are between 100 and 300 units per deal.
Yeah. That makes sense given what you said. I know I've had other people on in the same space, and they've said, you kind of get to that 20s, 30s, 50s, and then you can go. It doesn't really matter where you go after that at that volume. So are you looking for more value add or something that's rent ready? And then also tell us about what you prefer in occupancy rates, because I think that's really important for people. Again, if you're brand new, we're not telling you to go out and do this, but in a year, you're going to be psyched that you just heard this.
Sure. Yeah. So we prefer pretty ugly babies, right? Like, we want to do a lot of the work ourselves, which is not to say that there's not a ton of value in just buying a stabilized 4.5 cap for the right groups.
Yeah.
But speaking to that same language of competitive advantage, we have some good friends that own and operate a hard money lending company that everyone would be familiar with. And at BPCon, I ran into them, and they said that Brian, my business partner, is their most trusted borrower in the country. Yeah. And I was like, dang, we need to put that on t-shirts. Like, that's the marketing we need for Jericho. But like, if that's true, and that's, our superpower, again, it would be damaging the potential for what we could do if we weren't leaning into that, either from a growth perspective or from a risk perspective.
Yeah.
So if we can buy something for even, 9 million and we have a better than good certainty that it's going to be worth 14 or 15 on the back end, yeah, we're going to take that spread every time.
Yeah. So your guy's style is more the C- look property in a B area. That's how I think of it.
Totally. Yep.
And I think that's a great thing even for houses. You always want the worst house on the best block. That's just a much better play because the block's good. You're already held up.
Totally.
As opposed to the other way. Cash flow looks good on a regular C-, but it have no appreciation potential. Like, what are you taking other people's money to put in? It's not going to work.
And let's remember too that like real estate doesn't take place in an Excel spreadsheet. Like those C- neighborhoods, like they really are C- neighborhoods.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like we don't touch that anymore. And you and I both know folks that are doing really, really well playing in that wheelhouse. But I think there's value as you're gaining experience in the industry to figure out this is our thing. We don't really have any desire to be a wholesaler and a flipper and a BRRRR and a multi. Like, we want to be the best in the world at this. And we are not a fit for 99% of deals, but we are the only logical conclusion for this 1%. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we've learned in the last 2 years is, and hey, y'all, like everyone else is listening, Goldman has the US real estate market pegged at $32 trillion. You don't need to be the jack of all trades. Like,
definitely not.
I am completely cool just owning my 1% of that 32 trillion,
Yeah. And you also made a pivot to get here. So if you're in if you have a few assets that are similar and it's not your bag, sell them at a good price if the timing's right and the loan capitalization, everything looks good, and pivot into something else and do your research on it. I think that's why podcasts are so helpful. You can just be like, oh, I'm not really haven't thought about tax liens. And then you listen to one and you're like, that sounded pretty good. Like, don't really have to do every time. Like, I've had like 3 or 4 land flippers on, and every time I get off, I'm like, I have to do this. It seems like, why aren't I doing this? But it's hard because, like you said, I need to just, get focused. And I think 2024, I'm going to try to focus myself as well. But I do like a lot because I do this every time. I'm like, well, I mean, what Nick's saying is pretty good. Now I got to go, large scale multi seems great. The guests are so good. I'm always swayed.
Well, that's a testament to who you're bringing on the show then, my friend. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you go into that plan, what's the partnership? Like, how many people are involved in the money end for you? And then how has that been in terms of, like, you're always good at sales, but now you're kind of safekeeping people's money. And obviously you're bringing in people from prior works, which I love to do as well. I think that's really smart.
Yeah. Sorry. The main part of the question was like, what does the future look for that?
Well, how many people are involved in these deals just in general? Because I know you're not doing it like standard. We were talking before, standard syndications and the issues with them. How are you structuring these? How many people are involved? And how did you get that working? I think that will, help us kind of get wrapped up on that.
Yeah. So we typically raise anywhere from $100,000 to $500,000 from our pool of investors, which I realize not everybody has access to that, world, which makes it all the more important to be expert at what you're currently doing to try to get there. Right. And then, sorry to all of our syndicator friends, but I have a bias that I think most syndication models are actually built on recurring monthly revenue. If you meet a syndicator, one of the first things that they'll tell you is, hey, my name is Nick Cooley. I have 100 million AUM. Well, on the one hand, that inspires some level of trust because I can trust the person that has 200 million more than I can trust the person that has 100 million given. But I also know that most of their business model is really built on that 1% recurring monthly. Because if I have an AUM number and I can work backwards, I know that I'm getting 1% of that top line every single month. And so, and I really don't want this to sound like a sales pitch, but what we do differently at Jericho is we don't charge any fees. Because if other people are going to be putting their money into the deal and I'm getting 2% at acquisition, 1% monthly, 3% at dispo, I'm getting the first 5 or 6% off the top before the LPs even get paid out. And so we do at Jericho a pref where they get the first 12% per year. And we get anything on the back end of that. which again, to the point, is not the right fit for a lot of folks. If you want wealth accumulation come any means necessary, if a syndication goes well, you're going to make a much better return there. We're the logical conclusion for folks that want to build that part of their financial portfolio, assuming 12, 12, 12, 12, 12. And luckily, we're not in a space where it has to be either or. And for most folks, it's really, what weight of each makes sense for your portfolio.
Yeah. So on these deals and the ones you're looking at, do you have like a turn where you're expecting to sell, or are you hoping with that model, like you're talking about, that most of these will be more, at least longer term holds instead of like 3 to 5 year burns?
Yeah, we bake everything in assuming a 10-year hold. When we talk with folks, I think there's a growing part of like the LP population that they actually don't want to have to find the next deal over and over and over. They want cash flow like we do, right? So it's about understanding what is the best case scenario for the folks that you're working with. And whether it's the chicken or the egg, we tend to attract folks that just want that monthly, quarterly check without any surprises.
Yeah. But I mean, I think one thing I've learned from Brian Burke is just like, it's operator. It's operator. Do I like the culture of this deal, which can be, hard now because everything can look pretty sweet. Everybody can make a really good slide deck that looks fancy, and you're like, wow, this seems amazing.
Yeah.
But like, you really have to talk to the operator and get to see, like, is this somebody that I just want to hand money to?
Yeah.
And I've found that recently that's really helped me judge the difference between syndicators and who I'm talking to, and how much money, of course, they have in the deal. But yeah, I think it's important to know, again, if you're brand new, syndication is actually really good option for just really busy people with excess money.
Yep.
But you just have to look, there's a lot of shiny objects, and we've been trying to protect everyone from them.
Yeah.
And that goes to just vetting the operator directly.
Totally. I'll always assume it's a scam until you are proven otherwise. Right now, there's a ton of bad operators. There's a ton of really good marketers that maybe don't know the real estate business all that well.
Yeah.
Because to your point, at the end of the day, you're trusting somebody else with your hard-earned shekels, and plan accordingly,
Yeah, I agree. All right. Last thing, Nick, if you could give advice to newer real estate investors in this current market, what would be one thing you would tell them that would at least help them start to take either action or more action on what they're doing right now?
I live a life in fear that I'm going to get kicked out of the bigger pocket circle, because I tell folks that for most people, they probably don't want rentals. Wow, no, Nick said not to buy. And what I mean by that is, if you're somebody that's making $65,000 a year in Seattle or Denver, one of these higher cost living cities, yes, you want to be able to build a portfolio that when you're 50 pays you every month. Totally get it.
Yeah.
But what people that do this for a living and have been doing it for a long time realize is cash flow really exists to protect you from not selling when you don't want to. It's harder to retire off of cash flow than you think. And so what I would encourage you to take a look at, if you're somebody that's newer, is, would I be better off buying a rental that makes me $100 a month in positive cash flow? Or would I be better off doubling my annual income and putting some of that excess then towards buying a rental? Because what real estate does do a really good job of is protecting your wealth and gives you incredible tax benefits. So maybe let's shift the perspective to, instead of you making $65,000 plus $1,200 a year, let's double that. And then let's figure out what we want to do with some of that excess after the fact.
Yeah. Great advice. I did just get a call from Dave Meyer, though. He said you're kicked out of bigger pockets. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Data
and you have to
no!
move. You have to move. Yeah. Anson Young said you have to move from Denver also. So I don't know what you're going to do now, but
funny.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Awesome, Nick. I really appreciate it. Where is the best place for people to get in touch with you? Is it Instagram, which is I am Nick Cooley? and that is the way that you expect it to be spelled. That's it. But I am. There's no A in there. It's just I am Nick Cooley. Is that a great spot for people to find you?
Yeah, that's the best. Otherwise, I hang out at Jonathan's house on Thursdays. So if you guys can, I'm just playing.
Yeah. They can't find me. I never leave the house, so nobody knows. I just sit over here recording this podcast all the time. Yeah, awesome, man. Well, I have a really good feeling we're going to stay in a lot of touch. Yeah, let's do a deal together because it seems like fun. I like to work with people who are really passionate about real estate, but also passionate about helping people understand that. And I really got that from you, and hopefully everybody else did as well. So I appreciate your time. Glad we finally got this one on the books.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. I think what you're doing is an awesome service to a lot of people. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right. That was Nick Cooley. I'm Jonathan Green. See you next episode. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with me, Jonathan Green. And I just want to remind you, and this is always an uncomfortable part, I don't want you to think that I'm begging for you to like, subscribe, follow, do whatever you have to do for the podcast, leave a 5-star review. But if you like the podcast and you think it adds value in the real estate investing sphere, then just do me a personal favor. Like the podcast, follow it, share it when you can with your friends, and be so kind as to write a 5-star review if you believe it deserves a 5-star review up against what else is out there. I would really appreciate it, and I hope you keep listening.